slowly going live for the first time. Is this thing's on? I think. Is this working? Are we actually live on Bearded? I've changed the name to Bearded Reviews, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's what. Well, to anybody who's going to be watching, you and I haven't done this since March of 2021.
Is it that long ago?
It's been since March 2021 since we last did any recording.
And you know why we stopped?
Well, I mean, I have an idea, but I don't want to upset you.
I was going to say, it was quite personal. I'm happy to share that here. But really, it was on me and my internet and how terrible it is. I'm rural countryside of Cambridge, and it was just lagging, and we weren't even able to have a conversation. Never mind people watching it and enjoying it. And I have, with the help of Elon Musk, turned that around so it's now satisfactory. So Starlink has helped me have usable internet, and we can now stream live, and there is no delay so far.
I need to, interestingly, with us now being able to go live because of Elon Musk, I do worry we may get canceled after this episode. Because he's powering this stream, and if some of our ideas aren't on par with what everybody thinks, then we may be yeeted from YouTube.
Do you think we're going to go onto that side?
No, I don't think so at all. No one cares. It's not a show that's ever with us. I think we're okay. But I just wanted to it's something that I've been thinking about this week, because when you suggested maybe we do a live this week. You shared with me a link, the first link, and it was a video I've watched about 4 times this week, and that was the Konstantin Kisin Oxford. Was it the Oxford Union speech that he gave? It was a 6-minute speech, and I'm curious because I watched it, and I watched it 4 times, and then I watched the rest, quite a few videos from his trigonometry page, just to get myself up to speed on him. And I had 2, I guess, opposing views seeing that video and seeing the rest of his stuff. I guess I'm curious as to what. That was the first video you grabbed when you said, well, this is what I want to, this is something we could talk about, or this person. Was that video the first one you grabbed because it was at the top of the list? It was the most popular, or was that one that resonated with you more than any other?
Yeah, I think a mixture of all of the above. So on this channel, what we were doing a couple of years ago was me and Sean are we're very similar. We're also very different. So how we treat people and how we talk about things and debate is very similar. We have a mutual respect. We're very calm, and we like to debate and talk about our different opinions on things, and we don't always agree. And I think we both agreed that although I would like to think that I'm probably more center than I am left or right. If I'm leaning anyway, it's got to be more to the right. And I think if you're leaning anyway, it's probably going to be to the left, which makes a great conversation. I think we both appreciate the other side and value it, but we probably have natural tendencies in either direction. And this was one of those things. So I love having debates with Sean. And this was one of those things that just popped up on my radar. I think it's because I'm quite anti-woke, and I might have seen some previous YouTube videos on that. It suggested it. I've seen this guy before, actually. And I seen him interview someone that I was interested in. So I thought, well, I'll check it out, and it had loads of views on it as well. And I thought it was fascinating. So I was quite keen to see what Sean's take was on it, to see how much he would agree, disagree, and his general vibe on the whole wokeness and what Konstantin's thoughts were on it. So what did you think, mate? You watched it 4 times. You're kind of mixed on it.
I don't think I was mixed on the video. I was mixed on. So do you think maybe we should watch it just once through, or do you think? Because I kind of thought about when we were going into this, I thought let's watch it and pause it and comment. But I feel like it kind of negates from the body of work because he's building a narrative throughout the whole thing. And because it's only 6 minutes, I figure we'll watch it. And then if we need to go back to anything, we can. Does that sound like an idea to you?
Well, my thoughts might be I would have thought it might be worth just stopping on points, just to kind of check in when you're saying like, look, this is, I think let it roll. But if you're saying something in particular that you want to address and you're like, look, I really I couldn't agree more with this, or you know what, this thing, I just think he's talking a load of arse, then let's bring it up.
So I'm okay to stop it. The only reason I didn't want to stop it is I didn't want to be unfair, because but I think just to sort of take a step back, the whole idea of wokeness, I have an issue with that term. So I think it's really interesting. I think you and I may disagree on this, which is good. I think the term wokeness is it's one that only people who are trying to categorize a group of people with very little nuance and context, in my view, use that term. So, wokeness is a very subjective term if I were to speak to multiple people. And the video that we're going to watch, for me, I felt like that video did a disservice to Konstantin Kisin when I listened to the other videos he presented himself on. There was a few that I wasn't as keen on, but generally, even when I disagreed with him, I would have liked to have had dinner with the guy. I would have loved to have spent time talking to him, having a few drinks, just sort of hearing his view on the world, because I really liked the person. The messaging in this for me it was a bit all over the place. And there's one or two things that have happened here. One, I'm not intelligent enough to follow Konstantin Kisin's viewpoint or his path in this speech, or he missed the mark, because there was just so many conflating and so many points he was bringing up that were just sort of competing with each other, but I just couldn't connect with, and it was just opposed to the other things that I listened to with Konstantin Kisin. So that was where I was at with that. Why can't you pick someone like Joe Smith that we can review, so I don't have to dick about with the poor guy's name?
I think his surname is Kisin.
Kisin.
You'll say some.
Is it Konstantin? Because it's Konstantin or Konstantin?
Konstantin Kisin. I know that that's the way they've said his surname, but I think people will know who we're talking about.
Probably. Should we play the video?
Let's jump in.
All right. I'm a little rusty here. Present. I'm going to do this like a
pro.
I got my glasses on. Oh, I've got that, and share audio. Okay. All right. Here we go. Yeah. Any minute?
Oh, something's happening. It's loading.
There we go. All right. So, and actually what I've tried to do whilst we were talking, you'll be quite impressed with this. I didn't add any tags to this video. So I've added tags for Konstantin Kisin and wokeness, Oxford Union, just to see if that pulls anybody in.
Trigonometry.
Oh, yeah. Let me put that one on too. Would you bear with me for a second, Hugh?
Yeah, let's do it.
I want to make sure I'm giving this the time and attention that I should have given it when I could have put these tags in a half hour ago. Trigonometry.
So whilst you're dicking around, for those people that haven't seen this as well, Konstantin runs a channel called Trigonometry, about kind of triggering people and triggering issues, with a fellow stand-up comedian. I'm not an expert by any means, but this is how much I know so far. They've turned it into a small business. I think he's got 400,000 followers now. This video has helped him blow up, and he's been on loads of different programs and interviews and podcasts. He's been on American TV. He's been here in the UK. What's the debate show they have on the weekends in the evenings?
You mean Question Time?
Question Time. That's the one. So he's been on Question Time, I think, a couple of times as well. So he's been on ITV Morning News and stuff like that. So in the UK, he's kind of got some hot spots. He's starting to blow up. I think it is a team, but he's been kind of like the figurehead that's bringing people into this now. And he does admit that he's a stand-up comedian. He pokes fun. He is trying to exaggerate his point, I think, to stir the pot a little bit. So I think it's just worth giving a little bit of context to who he is and what he stands for. But I thought the speech was fascinating. Really, really enjoyed it.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. It was fascinating. Yeah. And I will say that the guy is clearly incredibly intelligent.
Clever guy, for sure.
And
good communicator.
He's so good. Yeah. And what we're about to watch, I think what the main takeaway for me is when I listen to him live, he's prepared when he does speak, but this Oxford speech, he's clearly spent time preparing, and he did a good job of delivering the speech technically. I just feel like when he's live, the message that he's delivering is clear and I get it, and I can either disagree or agree with it. When we watched this, I found that this was just a conflation of points that didn't necessarily connect. And maybe you can help me understand it. But let's play. And if there's anything you want to comment, just start speaking up, and I'll hit the old pause button.
Cool.
Let me know if you can hear it.
Well, first of all, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you for that preview of the 2024 American election we witnessed earlier. And if you're not persuaded to vote for the proposition tonight by that speech by James, I don't know what will persuade you.
By the way, I just want to say that's a pretty killer tux. He's pulling that off well. I think it looks like a bit of crushed velvet on the top. I'm not even kidding. It's a pretty cool tux compared to all of these people. Like that guy in the back, I'm not a fan of the white bow tie.
Yeah, we review everything on this channel. Clothes, hair, everything.
You will not know this, but I was supposed to be the first non-student speaker for the proposition. I've now been the fourth, which means that I now have to thank all the previous speakers for making my best points for me. And I find that the main reason now that I have left to be in support of the motion is that I am so tired of talking about woke culture. That's why it's gone too far, more than anything else. And I thank the other speakers for making the points for me, because it means I don't have to reiterate the point that no, free speech is not some right-wing reframing of whatever. It's the foundation of Western civilization. Upon this civilization is built and the Enlightenment values that led to it. I don't have to make the point that has been made by far better people in the past, that the only way to deal with the problem of racism is to treat people on the content of their character and nothing else. And the fact that woke culture seeks to overturn that is a new form of racism that we must all oppose.
So I think he's referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, because he does a really good job of defending comedians when it comes to free speech. And I think this is along those same lines of people have been accused of being racist because of maybe jokes or comments they've made. And I think he's potentially inferring that woke culture is looking to cancel people. Am I getting the gist of maybe what he's alluding to from what we haven't heard?
Mate, I think we're in the same boat with this. Yeah. I don't know what he's alluding to. I have an interpretation of that. I think things have gone so far the other way. Like, we've come on leaps and bounds with regards to racism, and I think there are I'm just going to use an example here, which could be, like, I put it on myself, that when I went to the fire brigade, the fact that I was a white male in my mid-20s when I tried to get in made it extremely difficult to get in. Whilst if I was an over 40 female from a different nationality, that would increase the chance of getting in, because you needed a certain percentage of getting in. So they're trying to make things fair from an outcome perspective. And I think it's kind of gone too far. So that was my interpretation of this, is that we've tried to readdress the balance and make everything fair, that it's actually leaned against the white male. The young white male is probably the hardest position to be in, when before it was, the easiest place to be in. So that was my interpretation of his point.
And I don't want to go down the wrong avenue. The only thing I take issue is I don't think it's the hardest position to be in to be a white male. But I think the conversation you're having, your situation with the fire department, I think that's a concept that is debatable, definitely. And I think that whole idea of giving, let's say, minority groups more opportunities, which compromise your opportunity, I think that comes from a space of, what's the word? Good faith. But I think sometimes the application of these ideas, aren't necessarily ideal. I think that's something that is a debatable point.
Yeah. So, again, this is an assumption of what his point. Neither of us know categorically what he's referring to. What from my point of the trying to go for equality of opportunity is something that I would fight for, and everyone has the same right to go for it. Yeah. The equality of outcome I have issue with. It's because it's impossible. Because it's impossible to have an exact split of men, women, every single race, every single age, every single, whatever its sexuality, whatever you want to put it into that box. But every single one every single human should have the same opportunity to go for anything. So that's what I back. But I think we've gone too far, and we try and control that. But I don't know. That might be irrelevant to what he said. But
I was curious if, and I think, yeah, good to know we're on the same page. I was just curious about it. I really had no comment on that. The only thing I could link it to is he was talking about much of what he talks about is, which I think if anybody watches this and you go into the trigonometry video catalog, the videos where he's defending, there's a few comedians that have been called out for inappropriate jokes. I think Joe Brand was one that he defended on BBC News, and he defends that whole freedom of speech and that little niche area of comedy and where that sits in free speech. He is incredible at backing freedom of speech and comedians in a way that I think is relatable to everybody. So I'm not a hater, and that's one of the things I've come away from this. He does an incredible job with that.
I back him. I think that point in particular is so we all need to get behind that message that you shouldn't be trying to suppress free speech. And if people are idiots and racist and bigots and misogynists, let them be that. Let them be that. Don't try and cancel and close down. Again, it kind of a sentence I've heard Jordan Peterson say before is kind of the cancellation of free speech leads to tyranny. And I couldn't agree more. Like, we need to be able to speak, even if it's idiotic. Let people be idiots then, stop trying to close them down. And let's
we'll have to pick this up
and work on it.
Yeah, I think this is one that I don't want to pull too much away from this. I think the only point I want to make, and this is where we go, and then you make your next only point you want to make, and then I'll do the same thing again in a second, is, there is, I'm very liberal when it comes to, this is going to sound, so this is where we put labels on things. So I'm going to say I'm very liberal on something, but that may lead people to allude that I'm going to say something else. I'm very liberal on freedom of speech in that I think people should be able to say what they want. There is always going to be a dividing line, because whilst in America you can say what you want to a degree, if you were to get on, if let's say Donald Trump were to get on his Twitter handle and start pushing his supporters to kill people, he would be arrested for incitement. That is, there are limits to what you can say publicly in the eyes of the law, even before social media. And I think that's where, who's deciding those lines. I think this is where it becomes a complicated issue, and it starts to skew the other way too much.
Yeah, it's fair one.
He means also, I will not use this opportunity to say I told you so, as someone who spent the last 5 years warning people in the West that if we continue to erode our culture, if we continue to undermine our confidence in Western values, that our enemies like Vladimir Putin will seek to capitalize on it. I will not make any of those points tonight at all. Instead, I'm not going to talk to those of you who already agree with me, which I imagine is most of you. I'm not going to talk to you because I imagine after everything you've heard tonight, you're going to vote for the proposition. I'm going to confess I will take your vote for granted. Tonight, I am the Labour Party and you are the Red Wall. Now, I want to talk to those of you who are woke and who are open to rational argument. A small minority, I accept.
So again, right away, I'm like, okay, so whenever anybody refers to if you are woke, I just feel like it's almost like I hate to use the term dog whistle because it's got so many other connections to, let's say, racism, but I'm trying to get that point across. It's almost like a tagline in a video that you want to pick up to be able to make sure you're communicating with the people that you want to communicate with. So he's got a group he wants to get on side with. And saying if you're woke, for me, there's no definable woke. Woke is something that people who are accusatory or somebody who's critical of a large swath of individuals will say if you're woke. And for me, that's where I start to shut off a little bit with these conversations. That doesn't mean I'm not listening, but when he said that was the first point. I'm like, oh, Christ, it put me off a bit.
Yeah, I just haven't taken that line too seriously, because I don't think there are many people saying I am woke. Even if they are, if anyone would categorize them, like you said, it's a very subjective term. I've just taken that for what it is, that he is speaking directly to us, to the people that feel this way, the people that feel that woke culture has gone too far. I don't think people that are actually woke and that would even say that they are and would even be watching this. But yeah, so I've taken that line as a bit of a pinch of salt. I think it's a little bit kind of tongue in cheek, and I didn't take it as literal.
No, I just took it as a qualifier where I'm now on alert that we're now going to go down this. So this isn't necessarily what happens here, but when I hear that, we're going to be going down this one-sided, piece of rhetoric that's going to not necessarily take any sort of nuance into account, and we're going to be talking in generalities where one side, which represents a very, very, very small percentage of people that have existed through the entirety of time, are now being labeled. And that's I have a bugbear with this term. So that's right away when I heard that, it just sort of put me off a bit. Felt like it was important just to chime in with that.
Because one of the tenets of wokeness is, of course, that your feelings matter more than the truth. But I believe in you. I believe there are those of you here who are woke, who are open to rational arguments. So let me make one. We are told that your generation cares more than any other about one issue in particular, and that issue is climate change. We're told that many of you suffer from climate anxiety. You wish to save the planet. And for tonight, and tonight only, I will join you. I will join you in worshipping at the feet of St. Greta of climate change. Let us all accept right here, right now, that we are living through a climate emergency and our stocks of polar bears are running extremely low. I join you in this view. I truly do. Now, what are we to do about this huge problem facing humanity?
So, by the way, I would say when I've listened to this, I would say, and I haven't heard him talk about climate change, but I would say that he probably would agree that climate change is an issue that needs to be addressed, just generally. Even though he sounds a bit tongue-in-cheek here, I don't necessarily think he's completely one of those anti-climate change or climate change is a hoax or the science isn't settled or the 3% of scientists who disagree with it need to have a louder voice or anything like that. I think he's probably somebody who does agree. Yeah, science is saying this is something we need to consider or look at.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, we don't know. I would be inclined to agree with you from what I've seen, but I think I've seen a couple of clips of not related to him at all with this climate anxiety. For example, the two students that threw the soup over the painting and glued their hands
and then
to the
tried
wall.
to super glue themselves to the wall. I think they did.
They put their hand to the wall at the same time, and then they went on Patrick Bet-David's podcast and were interviewed on it, and they actually believe the world is going to end with it. That she was, in her own words, terrified, petrified of reaching 30. She doesn't think she's going to reach 30. She's convinced of it. So there's a genuine, from that alone, okay, you could talk about minority, but I've seen an example of two somewhat very intelligent, articulate women that are absolutely horrified that, and the world is going to end in their view, and there wasn't really much rationality around that. They felt they were giving a rational argument. I wasn't particularly buying into that either, but yeah. So I think he's addressing those two, and I think the many others that are in that camp.
I'm going to come back to that because I think he does reiterate that, and I do have thoughts on that, on that specific reference, but I'm going to save that until he brings that up in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
What can we in Britain do? We can only do one thing. You know why? This country is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, which means that if Britain was to sink into the sea right now, it would make absolutely no difference to the issue of climate change. You know why? Because the future of the climate is going to be decided in Asia and in Latin America by poor people who couldn't give a shit about saving the planet.
I'm gonna, because I think he's speaking in. I'm not going to pick apart that statement because I understand what he's trying to say. It's tempting for me, and I don't think it does this argument any service for me to say, if Britain sinks into the ground, Florida doesn't exist anymore. Neither does New York City. This is a big problem all over the world. Oh, don't say that, Sean. That is not what he's referring to. Of course, he believes that. So I think we are going to give him the benefit of the doubt that that's not his greater point. He's talking about where the issue lies, who owns the majority of that issue.
That's exactly what he's making. He's being deliberately facetious, and that, to put another way, if Britain did everything perfectly, we would only contribute to that 2%. And his point of Asia and South America being the two biggest contributors, I think, is a very fair argument.
I don't. I think it's a bit of a straw man.
So,
I mean, if you're looking. So for me, if you were to compare, I understand what he's saying, and he's putting these countries in these little boxes, as if Britain making a change. Let's say a country that is exponentially richer and pays, let's say they're responsible for paying or supporting Brazil and cutting down rainforests, or in Central America and mining lithium because of demand for, for the wood, for the, all the resources that will come out of Brazil, or all of the tech that comes out of China. So he's going to refer to China in a second. And to just say that, the people that don't have cars, don't have money, don't have mobile phones, and don't generally probably produce the same amount of CO2, per capita, if you were to just look at Britain in sort of a lockbox, that's going to make no difference to the world economy. No impact to climate change. And again, I don't think that's the greater point he's making, but I also don't think that's a fair representation of the situation. If you were to address climate change if you were to address climate change in the UK, if you were going to start making changes in the UK, that would impact a wider part of the world in, how we spend our money, how the US spends its money, and how that impacts these other cultures.
Yeah, I mean, we've come at this from a different angle, because I know that he's trying to summarize a massive point. And if he talks about climate change for, say, 2 minutes, to try and not group things together and be generalistic to make his point, which is there is such an obsession about what we're doing and to clean out our Marmite pots and to be recycling and doing all that. What he's saying is you are doing absolutely jack shit on the grand scheme of things of 100% contribution to climate change. And really what these guys do is going to make all the difference. Now, you could argue that actually there are other countries involved and there's much more nuance. And of course, you're right. But I think the generalized argument that our recycling and what we do at home and getting an EV car instead of diesel is going to is going to make everything better. It will not. Like, we could do everything, and I still think we should do what we should do and be responsible. But we have to be realistic in the fact that there are far bigger players involved, and that it might be better to try and align our efforts in a different area, which he comes on to.
Yeah, and let's let him speak, because I want to come back to that point, because I understand what you're saying, and I still don't necessarily agree with that. I think my view is the people that are spending the money, the people that are supporting the industry that maybe creates the carbon, even from the perspective of these countries that provide fossil fuels to other countries. I mean, they're the ones that from an economic standpoint are going to want to be more green, just for sustainability, but also from a business perspective. There's a reason why people aren't investing in Blockbuster, and coal being the blockbuster of the renewables world. It's there's going to be a point where we're going to fine tune wind farms or solar energy or nuclear energy. Those energy, that's where I think these governments, these countries, are going to see a huge profit margin, because coal is just not a good place to invest. So I think those countries that are going to be providing energy for other places, they're going to be the ones that are going to want to do it anyway, even just economically, for Britain, for the US, for, all these Western cultures.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
This guy cracks me up in the back. He can't keep his mouth shut.
It's going to be decided by poor people in Asia and Latin America who don't care about saving the planet. You know why? Because they're poor. Because they're poor. I come from Russia, which is not a poor country. It's a middle-income country. 20% of households in Russia do not have an indoor toilet. What they have is an outdoor toilet. And I don't mean one of those nice portaloos that we get here. I don't even mean a Glastonbury portaloo. I mean a wooden shack with a hole in the ground that holds a collected fermented memory of the last 10,000 visits. How many of you are going to go home tonight and say, let's rip out our bathroom and erect a Siberian shithouse in the back garden?
Actually, a mate of mine, he moved and married to a woman in Russia. And it was funny to see, they had, it wasn't even a poor house. They had a shitter in the garden. It's quite a cultural
Yeah.
thing over there. It's, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of in Britain. You still see this now. Britain has I think it was in the 70s specifically, got popular to have the toilet room separated from the shower room. And that was you still see it from these houses that were built in sort of the 60s, 70s. And I think that's kind of the same thing in Russia, where you still see a lot of houses that are fairly well-to-do, or even just sort of middle income, still having shitters out in the garden.
My brother brought a house last year and it had that. They've knocked through and created it into one. But it was absolutely common. And we used to have, like, I know some of the houses that I've been to, like relatives as well, and even the house I'm in now used to have the toilet was outside, and that you kind of knocked through and then created a bathroom inside.
I'm a big fan of the outdoor toilet, if I'm honest. I think they should come back.
I don't mind it at all. Yeah, I don't
like
mind
if I
it.
went to somebody's house and I had a shit, like if I'm having a shit, like desperate to have a shit, and I'm at not at your house, I'll have a shit at your house and I won't feel too bad about it. Like I'll courtesy flush, so I will make sure it doesn't hang around a lot.
You're a good man.
I am. But there's always some trepidation when you're at a party and you have to shit because you can't really hold it. And you have sort of a uncommittal shit. And I would love the idea that they would have an outdoor toilet that I can just absolutely destroy and nobody's the wiser. It's just, I think this is something that needs to come back big time.
I support that.
Yeah. By the way, the first thing we've agreed on is outdoor toilets so far in this call.
And if you're not, why should they? 120 million people in China do not have enough food. I don't mean that they don't get dessert. I mean they suffer from malnutrition. That means that their immune system is breaking down because they don't have enough food. You're not going to get them to stay poor. Imagine you're Xi Jinping, the leader of China. When you were 10 years old, there was a revolution, a cultural revolution in your country, and people came and they put your father in prison. Your mother had to denounce him. Your sister killed herself. And you, no longer enjoying the protection of your formerly powerful father, were sent to a village where you lived in a cave house. And here you are, decades later. You have clawed your way up the bloody and greasy pole of Chinese politics to be the undisputed supreme leader of the very Communist Party that destroyed your family. And you know that the main thing you have to do to survive and to stay in power is to deliver the one thing that the people of China want: prosperity, economic growth. Where do you think climate change ranks on Xi Jinping's list of priorities? A third of all children who live in extreme poverty in the world live in India. That means they are starving and dying of preventable disease. Now, about 15 months ago, my wife got pregnant. Not me, because we're old school.
Taking a shot at the gay people. Hey,
I like that. I like that. When you said gay people,
or is it? Oh, sorry. Is it the trans community?
No,
see, this is how I'm. So he's talking about.
So have you not heard the expression that say, me and Lou, like, oh, we're pregnant? Like, no, she is, not me. Like, but people are like, oh yeah, we're pregnant now.
See, the way I heard that is, I thought about him referencing the traditional way. I just thought two, let's say, male couples having a baby, but the one is male, but kind of, that was the first thing I thought when he said that. And I could be wrong about that.
No, my understanding, because I've heard men say that. Yeah, we're pregnant, and I'm kind of inclined to agree with him on that.
I'm gonna and I would too. I'm gonna play that again because I think me and the immature audience, which I'm gonna lump myself in with the immature audience, I wonder if we thought the same thing, because I've heard this 4 times, and each time I'm like, wait, let's hear it again.
About 15 months ago, my wife got pregnant. Not me, because we're old school.
So you think he's referring to the we?
Yeah. So my wife got pregnant. Yeah, exactly. My wife got pregnant, not me, because we're pregnant. Yeah, we're pregnant. I've just heard a few people mention it, and I was just thinking, I thought it was odd when I heard them say that. I was like, oh, okay, but didn't really think much of it, and I think it's a nice little jab.
If my wife got pregnant, I could see myself wanting to sidle in on that. We got pregnant. Yeah, I could see myself doing that. Just to
We're
wind her up
expecting a baby.
Yeah. Oh well, that
that's different.
that is true. That's a true statement. We are.
That's what I'm
expecting a
saying.
baby.
That would be, I think, more correct, biologically correct.
So he would say it's okay to say we are expecting a baby, but not say we are pregnant.
I mean, at the end of the day, say what you want. I don't think it's that important, and I think it's quite funny that you take the piss out of it, because anything that's a little bit odd like that, I think we absolutely should be taking the piss out of it.
I do.
Yeah, if your wife will have a very different pregnant experience than the male will. So I think the fact that you're like, oh, we're going through this, it's like you're not doing anything. Your job was finished quite a long time ago, and it didn't last that long when it did. And then it's kind of all up to the female. So I think give her that one, and to try and say like we are, I think is quite funny. I mean, fill your boots if people want to do that, and I don't think it's that important, but it's funny.
I think it's the most important thing we've spoken about on this speech so far. I couldn't tell if you were like annoyed that I said that, or there was a delay, because I thought surely that was going to get a reaction out of you, Hugh.
No, I'm not annoyed at all. No.
I know.
And for 9 months, we talked about what our boy would look like, what he might do when he grows up. We looked at baby scans and videos on YouTube about what the fetus looks like at 9 months and 12 months and 20 months. And eventually he was born. And he is this cute little bundle of joy. He's cuter than about 80% of puppies, right? Now, if you said to me that I had a choice, either my son had a serious risk of starving or dying from a preventable disease in the next year, or I could press a button and he would live. He would go to school. He would bring his first girlfriend home. He'd go to university and graduate and become a woke idiot.
Hilarious.
And then he'd get a job and get married and have children and become a man. But all I have to do is press this button. And for every day of my son's life, a giant plume of CO2 is going to get released into the atmosphere. Now, you're all very young, and most of you are not parents. Let me tell you something. There is not a parent in the world who would not smash that button so hard their hand bled. You are not going to get these people.
I agree. I don't think there's anybody in the world who would disagree with that. I don't even think environmentalists would disagree with that.
I was going to say, I find that would be hard to disagree with. We don't have kids.
Neither of us do. Hence why we debated the we getting pregnant thing. It's not something that's come up. But I think that's a great, for me, that was the best framing within his speech there. That was the best, idea that he was building a conversation around. So I'm completely in agreement with that. And I think a lot of people there would be, to be fair.
Well, mate, I think the audience spoke as well.
Yeah.
That was one of the bigger round of applause, I think, in the whole speech. And I think it's, hard to deny, really.
Yeah.
People to stay poor. You're not even going to get them to not want to be richer. And so I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one thing we can do in this country to stop climate change. And that is to make scientific and technological breakthroughs that will create the clean energy that is not only clean, but also cheap. And thank you. And I want everyone to get home on time today, which is not going to happen.
He looks like kind of a dick too in the back. I'm going to go back.
It's not only
based
clean,
on
also cheap.
Hold on, let's just see. He just looks like a dick.
That on?
He's got, I'm saying this as somebody who's familiar. He's kind of just got that like punchable face. I mean, I have a punchable face.
It's the tie. Make an effort. Where's the bow?
You know what? The collar is a bit, I can see from here it's a bit frumpy. And he's sitting in like a very weak position. I feel bad. I don't know who this guy is. I'm just taking the piss. So if this guy watches this, no offense. I'm just like, he looks like a dick there, and he just keeps interrupting, and that's annoying me. Fucking woke is what he is.
Yeah, I think fair point, Sean.
Thank you.
And no, thank you. And the only, I want everyone to get home on time today, which is not going to happen. And the only thing that wokeness has to offer in exchange is to brainwash bright young minds like you to believe that you are victims, to believe that you have no agency, to believe that what you must do to improve the world is to complain, is to protest, is to throw soup on paintings. And we on this side of the house are not on this side of the house because we do not wish to improve the world. We sit on this side of the house because we know that the way to improve the world is to work, is to create, it is to build.
False dichotomy. I don't know. Like for me, it's that for me. Again, he's an intelligent guy and he's making a speech with a point. But we on this side of the room, we are the people who we believe we have to work. You know, you on the other side, you're different because you're victims and you feel like everything should be handed to you. Everybody on that side. But on this side, we're the people who are responsible. We know how to take care of you and the rest of us. And we're willing to look through all that bullshit to make the right decisions. Whereas you are on the other side. You know, it's that juxtaposition of good versus evil from his perspective. And the world doesn't work that way. And I expect that from certain people, but I didn't really come to this conclusion until the third time I watched it because I'd seen his videos. And I feel like he's better than that.
So I see it for what it is, that he's trying to make a generalized point to drill home his point. I don't think he fundamentally believes that to his core, but I would say as a general rule of thumb, he probably does, and I would be inclined to agree with him, because if you're left or right, who exists more in victim mentality and who exists more for solution orientation? And I would say that actually, Sean, you may be inclined to have a debate, but I don't think it is much, because whenever I see any victim mentality, they tend to go towards progressive viewpoints. And I think as a generalized statement, I'd say that's a pretty fair statement to put across. It's not going to account for everyone. You're absolutely right. But I think that most of the people that I see that have that kind of victimhood would lean to that side.
I see victimhood happens on the extremes on both sides. You know, when you look at those instances where people are complaining about, let's say, if we look at just a very classic liberal or woke point of view, that a man can't call himself a woman with a penis, or those. At the end of the day, who gives a fuck? And the people on the other side are being victims about, their, cultural appropriation, or, the people not listening to science, and you can't call. Who cares? Who cares? Just do your thing. Stop getting in other people's shit. And it happens on both sides, because there are certainly victims on the side, on that liberal side. But I think what we're seeing is not so much an issue of this whole thing here. Is not an issue of we're trending in a direction where people on the right side of this are victims and tend to be the ones that are crying. You can have that debate, but what we're seeing is just the same thing that's happened in human history throughout time. And woke isn't a new thing, if I was to use his definition. We just have more visibility of these things. And the stuff we see is on the extreme ends. So when we start talking about, the two women who glued themselves and threw soup on a painting, that shit's been going on forever. That's not new, but we're seeing it on social media. And now we're saying, oh, this is woke culture. Well, that's always happened. You could even say that in the US, the people which is a story now that stormed the Capitol building, that's the same thing as throwing soup on a painting. There's no difference whatsoever. So for me, why are we not calling that woke culture? Are they not waking up from we're going to talk about the vaccines in a second, which will make this video unwatchable. But, when we talk about people that are victims from, taking a vaccine that they believe is hurting them, or they're making, I don't want to spoil the next one, but victimhood is not, appropriated by the left or the right. It's appropriated by the extremes. I mean, that's how I see it. I don't see it both ways.
Yeah, so I think it's a very fair counter, and I'd agree with you with regards to storming the Capitol. I think what he's referring to, and this is all assumptions, so I could be talking out my arse here, which is fairly common. Could be
I've
the
just
case.
talked out of my ass for the last 10 minutes, so it's highly likely that you're going to do the same to a degree.
Here's what I see is that in the recent years of the last 5 years, things have been put in by new social norms have come from the left, not the right, generally speaking. Or some of the more extreme mainstream changes have been from that side. And they're often derived from victim mentality. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily a bad thing, but they've gone so far. I see a lot of it happening. I see a huge amount of it, far more happening on the left side than I do the right. And I think your counter of it does exist on the right. And here's an example I think you can't ignore, and you're correct. But I also think that my point of in modern society, social media, people go watch the BBC. You know, it is victim mentality, and it's largely from the side of this isn't fair. I have a right. I'm in a minority somewhere. You know, it might be a race, it might be disability, it might be age, it might be some you know, I'm missing out. And of course, you know, life is harder. But I think his point of let's be heroic, because every example, there's someone way worse off than you that has done far greater than you. You know, have done heroic life transformational things, and let's try and tap into a bit more of that of what you can do and use your disadvantages to an advantage. So that whole mentality of just general, let's just put the left and the side aside for the minute, because you know if that's confusing matters here, let's get the fuck out of victim mentality and get back onto solution orientation, which again what I see as the ultimate solution focus is the entrepreneurial focus. That is the entrepreneurial mindset. Entrepreneurs find solutions to problems in exchange for money. That is what they do. And so, which is, again, there are left and right, but generally speaking, people would put them on the right side, more capitalist viewpoints. So I think it's a generalized statement, what he's saying. And I think he's right to generalize, and I would agree with him. But your counter of, you know, the extremes showing victimhood and having a very good example of it, I think is totally fair.
It's interesting because there's a few things I wanted to unpack there. And this is Jordan Peterson. I heard him say, so this would be somebody I think that the right side of this room would probably be more a fan of than, sorry, the left side of the room than the right side of the room. And he's probably similar, not to you, but he would classify himself as fairly liberal in his views, but he has a pretty strong conservative following. Would I be accurate in saying that? So he would define, and he would say, I heard this in an interview, and I thought it was an interesting concept, and I'm not subscribing to this view. But he said, you know, generally, if you were to take a liberal-minded person and a conservative-minded person, and I think in this form between you and I, it's probably very accurate, that the liberal-minded person is generally more intelligent. Let me unpack that. So what he was saying, I was joking, by the way. I don't think I'm more intelligent than you. Actually, I think you are more intelligent than me. I can hold my own. That being said, what he says is, you know, progressives, over time, you know, just the history of time, progressives, their job is to look at the world and see how it can be different or better in their view. And there's and this is why they're called progressives, because they want to see things change, evolve, and they don't mind losing, you know, what is, you know, what were the good old days kind of thing. You know, what is sound, you know, moral way forward. We know what was right because we've lived it. So therefore, this is the right way to go. And progressives are like, well, wait. What if we were to, you know, why does somebody with a penis have to live as a man? Well, you know, like, I'm not making an argument. That's just some, you know, somebody who's fairly progressive and say, well, why can't we not just call them a woman? You know, why, you know, whatever. I'm not getting into that conversation. But and for a progressive, there's a lot of I guess what he was saying was, I'm going to paraphrase, it's more of a problem-solving mentality with you know, sort of keeping all options open, whereas an extreme conservative would be more, how do we get things back to the way they were? And I don't see, I think that's always going to be the way it is. Progressives are going to always try to change and move forward with things in ways that may make people that are conservative feeling uncomfortable. But there's always that balancing act. But it's just interesting that this isn't just a here and now thing. Throughout eternity, you know, if we go back to you know, slavery, you know, people at some point, there was somebody who was quite liberal who said, yeah, should we have black people working for us without paying for them? I don't know about that. I'm sure somebody called him woke at one time. You have these changes through history, and now we're starting to look at things like, if we lump everybody in with wokeness, let's say we take a black guy who's been pulled over 20 times on his way to work in Alabama, whereas white guys get pulled over almost never on the same motorway. Is he complaining? Is he woke because he should just do what the police say because he needs to follow the law? They're going to let him on his way if he shuts up? Or should he bitch and moan about that? And if he bitches and moans, is he woke? Or should he just stick with the rules, follow what the police say, and not question things? And I think we get into this dangerous place of just taking every argument and saying you're woke and you're a victim, when people who are highlighting things that they feel victimized about are saying, no, there's another solution here where we can move forward. And I think there's a lot of nuance there. Now, that's not to say there isn't victims. There's a fuck ton of victims, but I think there's nuance there. And that's why woke bothers me.
Yeah, I'm less triggered by the word woke. I think it's some of the stuff that kind of stands behind it. And I'm just, I
think it holds us back. I think that is... Oh, sorry, mate.
Yeah, no, sorry, it's okay, mate. I feel very strongly about the avoidance of victimhood, even for even in extreme cases, and the people that can learn to kind of accept and find reason and advantages to their the things that happen to them, they can take back control. Because when you become a victim, you lose control and you lose power. And I'm just someone that fundamentally believes that in life we need to try and regain that as much as possible. So if things are happening to you, just trying to not allow yourself to fall into that mentality and find the silver lining, the learning in it, the benefit from it somewhere, like even as strong as death, and try to flip it on its head wherever possible. And I think that it at the moment, I think our society reward victims. And actually, it then becomes a victimhood competition. I'm actually more of a victim than you because I had this. Oh my God! Well, you've got all these things working at it's like a badge of honor to have all these things that are working against you. And I prefer to listen to the person that has everything against them and they don't even mention it and they just go and smash it anyway. And that's what I want to try and encourage. And I want to try and avoid. And not listen to those people that are bitching and moaning about their circumstances. Like I understand, people have difficult existence, like everyone does, but there are equal number of people that have it worse than you and that are smiling and living a happy life. And so I believe there's fundamentally a way around that. That's why I kind of like the theme of this message. I kind of moving away from the woke word and the triggering around that. It's really about what he's trying to stand for, moving away from victimhood, which I couldn't agree more on.
Yeah, I just think when you describe victimhood, you're describing, in my view, to me, it sounds like a caricature we're describing, a caricature of a 1% part of the, of society. And I think there's nuance there, because if you were to take somebody who is, let's say, a bit more on the side of, if you were to take a Steven Crowder, which I think you are familiar with Steven Crowder.
I don't know any of his stuff. I know,
or even
I know his name,
Ben
I know
Shapiro.
his face.
So Ben Shapiro, and to be fair, Ben Shapiro, I don't hate Ben Shapiro. I don't agree with a lot of what he says. I think he's quite a provocative individual in how he conducts himself, or not what he says. But when he talks about, let's say, wokeness, if somebody were supporting LGBT rights, would he then, would somebody like him or him, start to say, okay, you're supporting a woke movement? And I'd be curious about that. Now, maybe Ben Shapiro wouldn't do that, but I feel like when you look at, let's say, some of the people that are marching for the rights of people that that feel like they're a bit marginalized, where's the line between them being a victim and them taking action and protesting? Because protesting is, America and Britain wouldn't be where we are without people protesting. So, at what point is victimhood and people complaining about the status quo, where is that line that we're drawing where you go from being a victim to somebody who's taking charge? Because you can't just, okay, I'm taking charge now, what do I do? Well, don't complain, just see if you can make a change. But if you complain, then you're woke. And that's I think there's, when we start looking at these conversations around wokeness, I feel like it divides the room, and it prevents that dialogue because there's so much nuance in there. And this is where I think, it's social media that plays a part. We talk about people being canceled. Being canceled isn't a product of people being the way they've been for, hundreds of years. It's a product of media. It's a product of social media. And it's a product to how people with money and access react to that. Netflix have not canceled anybody on their platform, according to them. So have Netflix seen anything negative happen to them? No. So Netflix,
they have cancelled.
So they were. I read this, and I don't know if it's true. So you may want to correct
Chris
me.
D'Elia. I know Chris D'Elia was taken down. His series, and I think his stand-up was taken down because of the whole accusations that were put on him. So I know of at least one person that had that.
So Netflix is, well, they're wrong about that. But even then, Netflix would be perpetuating, I guess, the cause and effect of what is woke culture. People say what they want. If there's freedom of speech, nobody's arrested them for saying what they want. Just the people that are paying them are the ones that are taking action to that. The issue isn't with the people giving them, saying these messages. It's the people, the vehicles for these messages that are the problem. Yet we blame the people for having a point of view.
Yeah, there's so much to go through on that. I think
that sums it up, and I think you could just agree with. I think I've nailed it on the head, really.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
I think you've raised some great points because I don't think it's about being silent. I think that's obvious. If there's an injustice, I think it's about raising that injustice. What my point comes down to is there are people that will raise that injustice, and that is all they do is complain about the injustice and do nothing else. Like, what is the solution to the problem? So I came up with things that we were talking about. I don't even know who I was talking with and why it came up, but it was, for example, like women in football, and there was this complaint about not having the same amount of airtime and the same opportunities as men, which in itself, you'd be like, yeah, that's right. They don't have the airtime. There aren't the same opportunities. And why do we think that is? It's because of the entertainment over a number of decades and the following that's had that. And there has been a suppression of women being able to play and have the opportunity to do that. And now, fortunately, we're in a time where they absolutely have that, and stadiums are starting to be filled, and it's brilliant. And what I would see is now we have this opportunity. I see some people complaining about what they don't. We don't have the same as this, or we don't have enough money as the men, or we don't have that. Just be better than the men. Okay, so I can understand where you're raising it, but focus rather than focusing 90% of your effort on making the point and then hoping someone changes it and losing all the power to someone else, hoping someone changes it. Be the change. Make it more compelling than men's game. The example that I had is for example, you can because male football, one thing that really pisses me off in this country is the respect to the referees. It's disgusting the way they treat them.
Yeah, I agree with
that you can see them swearing and vile coming out of them, and the rest don't do anything. They'll sometimes book them. It's but then you have a look in rugby, for those people watching the UK, you just look at the difference of how it's officiated. They call them sir. They'll ask for respect. If they do any back, they go, hey, no back check. If they back check, they'll then have a penalty and they'll move towards
NFL.
It'll work against them, as it should be.
Same.
So as an example, women can demonstrate how not to go down that path, but you're starting to see some of that stuff seep in there as well. So there's an opportunity just to do their own thing. Maybe don't complain about football, make your own sport, make it even better than football. That's my point. It's there are people that get stuck in the talking and do nothing about it and don't have a solution, and they just want someone to go and fix it. That's what I have a problem with. I have no problem with people raising it because you have to. That's the starting point. And yet, what are you going to do about it? Don't just raise it. Try and bring solutions to the table, and use it as an opportunity, as a platform to maybe make something even better. And that I can get behind fully. So that's one of my points. If that makes any sense, and happy to hear what your thoughts.
It does. I mean, can we contextualize? You're talking the specific point you're talking about, because there's two things in mind. One of which, there was a case the U.S. women's soccer team raised about pay, which ultimately got thrown away in court. So I think that was, I guess, a success to common sense, because they claimed they weren't getting paid enough, and actually their contract was more beneficial per game than the men's U.S. team. Or are we talking about, let's say, similar to the WNBA? Are we talking about the women's Premier League not getting the airtime that, let's say, the men's game is getting?
I don't know, when it comes to money, I think it's really simple. It's a capitalist environment. Like if you're bringing in the numbers, you're bringing bums on seats, you're selling shirts, you're selling tickets, you make the money, and you get rewarded for that.
So
it's a capitalist,
let's say,
it's a free market.
So if we were to take this issue, let's just say, I just want to pick an issue that's relative to what you're talking about. And let's say, people trying to raise the profile of the women's game, and there's women, or people on the side of the argument of, let's say, the Women's Premier League who are complaining about the preferential treatment towards the men's game. And if you were to take the body of people working on this issue, what percentage of those people would you say are the victims, are the people that are just complaining and expecting entitled treatment? And what percentage of those people are actually doing something productive to try to raise the profile of the game? Because I think that's the core of my issue. Because if we're to say 20% are just the real victims here, well, we've now clouded this whole issue in the perspective of they are victims. They just get off your ass and do something. If I'm one of those people that's working my ass off to try to raise the profile of the women's game, I'm listening to that argument thinking, fuck off. I'm doing the best I can. And don't put me into that grouping. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what Konstantin Kisin is doing, but I feel like culturally we tend to do that. We tend to the one example, if I can change examples, what was the one thing I was thinking? The one example there's this one guy I was speaking to on Twitter who I had a debate with on my other channel, and one of the things he wanted to debate about was and I did a little bit of reading on it, and I'm just like, this is a zero sums game. I'm not even going to bother, because he's got a view, and it doesn't matter what I say. That's his view. Even if I say, these are the things, what do you think about it? I'm willing to listen to your view. His whole purpose was just to change my mind and make me sort of a circus act on his channel, because he had like a couple thousand subscribers, whereas I have 300. So it wasn't even like people from my channel were even going to watch it. But it was the critical race theory debate in the US. And, I know people in education in the States. And what ends up happening is people take an issue that is very marketable. And what they do is they make it an issue. And then when you start speaking to people who work in schools, this isn't something we teach. What is critical race theory? It's a master's level law course to get lawyers thinking differently. It's only graduate level, and it's only taught in universities, and it's an elective. And we're making laws in Florida because there was one school that was probably private that had one batshit crazy teacher, and now we're making legislation for it. And now we're tarring anybody in Florida education as somebody who's trying to educate our children that white people are bad. And I think, this is sort of my soapbox here, this whole issue. And I think that's probably why I'm a bit sensitive about the whole woke thing. It's an interesting conversation, though.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. I think one of the points that you said earlier on, which is spot on, and is the problem, is media, and that they, unfortunately, those who scream the loudest, get the most eyeballs. And so, unfortunately, like people like myself on the receiving end of it, we get a lot of the minority or the view, but unfortunately, given so much airtime, and yet people that kind of counter it are shut down, and it's disappointing. And like you said, there are people that stand for their views, but just not the way it's been put across, or have solutions, or are working on solutions that are then tarnished in the same area, which is really a shame and disappointing. But it's a really valid point.
It's a really interesting conversation, and it's one that. And what I will say about this, and Konstantin, I would love to have, because he would absolutely embarrass me in this conversation, no doubt. I could not hang with him in this debate, but he would be really interesting to listen to, because he may even make some points that might change my mind about it. And I'm probably not doing a good job of pulling away from the actual message, which,
well, mate, he has they do live calls, and you can jump on there and
no.
Text and give your views and ask a question and counter it.
I think if we can, just going back to his points, I think the one thing, if we look at his greater point, and I'm just going to try to give a summary on what I think he's saying, and I think we could probably close it out on this video. I might have to change the link, because we're going to go on for another hour if we go to the next piece. But he's making the point that, he used China as an example. So I'm just going to try to reiterate to make sure I understand it. Imagine you scratch and claw, through, the mire that is, the world of China, poverty, suicide of your sister. You finally make your way to the top, and you are going to want to stay in power, and to do so, you're going to want to fix the poverty of those people that you've had to call and fight your way through to get to the top. And that is the only way you're going to stay in power, by making those people prosperous. So they're not giving a shit about renewables. They're giving a shit about prosperity. And those things are not linked in this conversation. And what I don't understand, I guess what I don't understand with this is he then doubles back to tech solutions. You know, I do think we need smarter solutions. It was something to that effect. Smarter, cheaper, technical solutions, which to me sort of contradicts the whole point. Look, there's nothing you can do. This is down to third world countries to deal with, because, you know, 2%, you know, we're 2%. So you can do your thing. That's fine. But at the end of the day, it's down to the poor people. And to then say China, which interestingly, China was an interesting example, because they've spent something like 400 billion on renewable resources with a view to create a shit ton of jobs and a shit ton of money for people and prosperity. I mean, at the end of the day, China is a socialist culture, and he's right. You know, the people in charge want to keep a level of happiness to, you know, to be able to maintain that level of power. If you know, North Korea is on the edge. You know, if North Korea had the numbers that China did, in my opinion, North Korea wouldn't still be in the same way that it's now. But I just feel like that's just a real contradictory piece, because it's almost like you're taking you know, causation, you're taking correlation and you're defining it as causation. And I just that was the piece that I thought was contradictory, but also didn't make sense, as if working for the renewables that China are trying to create aren't going to be helping China become prosperous, aren't going to put them in the lead in the world when renewable energy is the standard. So I think that was the bit that I found a bit fuzzy.
Well, I can't comment on that. I don't know. I've done any research in that area. I don't know. My takeaway from this was that the people that he's addressing are the people that are maybe complaining about the environment and what we're doing over here, and environment anxiety and climate anxiety. And his point is that, you know, even if we did everything perfectly, it's going to be a drop in the ocean compared to what other countries are contributing at the moment. And him saying that, you know, you can sit and complain about it, or we can try and I think his main point is there's only one way to come around it. Well, there isn't. There's obviously many more ways to potentially overcome it. But his main argument, which I think is a fair one, is that it probably is going to come from innovation. And we should just, rather than sit and bitch and moan about it and fear that we're going to die and blame everyone for not giving a shit. No, people do care. It's just they care more about feeding their families, perhaps more than the environment. We should be focusing our efforts on innovation as opposed to maybe chucking soup on paintings.
I think it's the audience he's speaking to about that. So he's conflating super glue, soup girls, and Heathrow, you know, M25 traffic stoppers with students that are spending a fuck ton of money at one of the best science universities in the world. So it's like you people need to, you know, maybe let's look at science. And I'm sure half those guys are like, what the fuck? I'm spending a lot of money on my degree so I can work in biology to make a more, you know, eco-friendly fuel. And that's where I'm just like, oh, that's exactly what these kids are here to do. Really? I mean, I would hope so. And I'll be curious if you polled all the people that he's appealing to, and how many of those people are just complaining and doing nothing about it. He's in that audience. You don't go to Oxford, like in America, you go to Michigan State to get a degree so you could then be a manager of a public supermarket potentially. That generally happens, but you don't go to Oxford to be a public supermarket manager. You go to Oxford, you get a science degree because you want to do something impacting in science. That Oxford degree means something.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the two ladies went to now that were that threw the soup over the painting. They were very articulate. I think they were very switched on as well. They were both students.
I'm curious now. Actually curious where they went to university. Where did they go to university? Soup? I don't even know. I'm not even looking up. No idea. I'm sure, but but this is the thing. I don't want to go down that conversation of, okay, well, yeah, the soup ladies may have, let's say they had a degree from Harvard or You know, they were Oxford students. We're talking about two batshit crazy ladies who speak clearly. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer was very articulate, versus a group of university students who are studying. I don't know how. I mean, to be fair, they're probably all like philosophy majors for all I know. So my point might be totally just knocked on its ass. But it's just Oxford is such a good science university. I mean, you're going to get some of the best. You know, didn't what's his name? Stephen Hawking go to Oxford? Or was he Cambridge?
Cambridge.
Oh, you might have to edit that out.
Hey, what are your thoughts overall on this video?
I just think it was, for me, there was the whole point of just, that was sort of the summary that I had to, because I had to listen to it 4 times and I took notes to follow this thematic series of non sequiturs, and then this overarching point surrounding this one good point about, you know, I'm a parent and I would put CO2 into the air. I just felt like it was a poor representation of his argument by saying, you know, you're just whining at Oxford University. You're not doing anything, students of Oxford University. Poor people are going to be the issue, and they're not going to do shit about it. Even though China, my example, is probably leading the world in renewables, and that's going pretty well for them right now. But yeah, there's nothing you can do, even though you probably are doing something right now. And that was sort of my takeaway from that, which I thought was such a juxtaposition from every other thing I heard from him. I if anything, I was disappointed by it because I felt like there was so much more that I could get out of that, or he could get out of that. So
no, it's interesting, mate. I mean, when I heard it, I was like, yes, go Konstantin. I like it. You know, it's just nice and refreshing to hear people speak out, you know, on opposing some of this absolute fucking ludicrous stuff that you know, the kind of what he categorizes woke culture and the new rules that are coming in and the pronouns and everything that's being forced down people's throats. It was just, you know what, I think from like a vibe of it, I was refreshed, because what you tend to see more of is that kind of woke, fake, overly progressive, overly, you know, it's just like, it isn't real. It doesn't seem real, but what you see on TV, and
ratings.
It was just nice to hear someone stand up and just say, and calling for what it is, because I'm kind of sick of all the horse shit that's been floating around. This was a nice little jab in that area. So yeah, I liked it. I liked the energy where he was coming from. I didn't take everything for granted. I'm aware that he's a comedian as well.
Are you saying
and that he's trying to trigger people?
Are you saying I took it for granted and that I was triggered?
I think you said that. I think you said on both points. But yeah, I just, you know what, I just find it quite refreshing. I've heard his other stuff, and I like the way he speaks. I think it, you know what I really like as well is just it's really nice and refreshing to hear someone have some jabs, you know, being a little bit facetious on purpose, like poking fun. And at the same time, putting over some rational, logical points, speaking with some common sense. It's just really nice. And actually, I'm not sure where he lies politically, but I like just to hear people talk like that wherever you kind of sit politically. It's just quite refreshing.
I think, and that's why I get frustrated listening to this, because I love his delivery and I love his style of debate. You know, when he does debate people, he's strong, but he's not an asshole. You know, I think that's one of the things people tend to lose. And I think you're somebody who, and I haven't read much about it, but I don't know if this sort of links into your reading on Stoicism. But I feel like when you go into a debate and you have to act dominant, and you have to sort of, you know, dominate the talking time and dominate, which you and I probably are guilty of doing at times anyway. You know, nobody's perfect, but I feel like if you go over emotional and you don't just depend on facts and logic, and you have to, you know, break down to, was it ad hominems? Is that what it is? I forget what it's called, where you start to insult the person. I feel like you've lost. And I feel when he goes, it's as soon as you raise your voice, you've lost in any conversation. If you lose your shit, you have lost control. And there's a reason you've lost your shit. It's because you don't have confidence in where this is going. And when he gets into those debates, he's very a matter of fact. He's very respectful. He doesn't treat the other person he's debating like an absolute asshat. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I would just counter. I don't agree with the raising voice. I think he raised his voice. He did change his tonality, and I think it's important to make your point there are certain kind of, you know, when he was making it about his son, and then you just raise the volume, and I'm making this point, actually it does hit home more. I think when it's constantly like this, and the whole, I think your point is spot on. But
I think that's more what I mean. I don't mean changing inflection. I mean yelling. So how can you say?
Yeah,
you know,
no, yeah. So yeah, I think that's fine. I think we're agreed on that. I think there was another point, but I lost it. I was going to say something else, but
well, it's
I think that what I would say in this as well, it's just a great talk, and you know, it's just a great first video to get us going, because I knew there was numerous points in there that we can kind of talk about it, and this is great. Like what we tried to do here is, you know, we pick apart some really big, important topics and just share some views on it and see where it takes us. Go down some rabbit holes, and yet, you know, like we've shown in the last hour and a quarter, there's a fair bit we don't necessarily agree on, but we can just have this conversation and you know, just share other viewpoints and open the door a little bit wider on each side. And sometimes, you know, that's all that's required. We don't have to be shouting. We can disagree and still be really good mates, and it's just fine.
I wonder, I hope it'd be fun to see if anybody does watch this, we get comments. I wonder if I'm a whiny liberal. Am I a whiny liberal?
Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and I think I'm a racist, homophobic,
that's right.
Misogynist. Like I'm pretty sure that I think we both got our labels there, Sean.
Yeah, I think in the private chat, didn't you something about tranny? I don't know. I'm just trying to. He didn't say that. I'm making a joke, everybody.
You don't need to feed anything else, mate. Yeah, there's enough of that. There's already enough of that content.
Hey, mate, it was really enjoyable. I think this is a good time for us to sign off. And hey, it was a good one back, and I'm looking forward to the next one. To everybody, we're gonna try to do this more regularly. I think we're gonna try to pick this back up, and if we will try to get this scheduled and out there. So if anybody is subscribing, you can see when we're recording. It'll be generally this time Saturday or Sunday, maybe. We still have to sort of hash that out. But yeah, thanks for that, Hugo.
Yeah, you're welcome, mate. And if any of you guys have got any suggestions for us, you've got any videos and clips you want us to work through and share our opinion, chuck it in the comments. And thank you for your time, and we'll see you very soon.
Take care.